In this lecture, we'll talk about tables. First, we'll talk about table rows, cells, and headers, then how to span rows and columns, then how to make a table for accessibility, then we'll talk about styling tables with CSS and structural pseudo classes in CSS. Alright, so I've created a basic HTML page here. I called it Seaside or Basketball. I've linked in a style sheet for later when we do the styling. And then we have a header and a footer and some main content. And right now the style sheet is blank. There's no styling that I've added in. And let's go ahead and add a table to list our games that the Seaside or Basketball will be playing this season. So we start a table with a table tag and end it with an ending table tag. And then we add rows to our table. So each row starts with an ending table row tag and a beginning table row tag and an ending table row tag. And then we can add columns to it by adding a TD. That stands for table data, and then we'll just put the date, the opponent, and we'll have a location and results. And finally, we'll have a notes, just in case we want to put any notes about the game. And this will be our table right here. So I save this and we'll refresh it. And now we can see that we have these things going across the top right here. Now we can't see any borders around this table. So for now, we'll just add border equals 1. We'll learn how to style it up better later on. This is just temporary so that we can see the borders of the table. And now we see the borders of this table. So I'm going to start adding their games in here. So we'll add the first game in. So another TD, and this is the first one, so it's the date. So their first game is October 31st. And then we also have their opponent, which is Hawaii, and the location is at Hawaii. That's the University of Hawaii on island here with us. And then we also have the results, and now they already played this game, so we'll go ahead and put the results in. They happen to lose this game right here, so that was the results. And this will be for any notes that we have right here. And let me spell location right. And so we'll refresh this. And now we have our one opponent right there. Now, these are actually headers, or they describe the content that goes in the column. So we shouldn't be using the TD. We should be using the TH tag instead. So that stands for table header. When we use the table header tag, we refresh, this says this is the header for this column right here. So again, when we're creating HTML, we're describing our document, so we should say that these are headers. So I'll snap my fingers and make the rest of them headers. And so now all of them are table headers because they're all headers for each column. And we'll refresh. And you can see by making them headers, it also makes the text bold. We can change how the text looks with the CSS styling later on. So I'm going to go ahead and add in some more games. I'll snap my fingers and do that. Okay, so I've added more games here. On November 5th, the BYU Hawaii alumni are going to play Tahiti in the Asian Pacific tournament. So this is the next row that I added on here. And then also on November 7th, BYU Hawaii is going to play Tahiti at BYU Hawaii. And then on December 7th, we're going to play Hilo at Hawaii. This is the University of Hawaii at Hilo, and that's going to be in Hilo, Hawaii, right there. And as we could see, now we have this table here. So we have the list of games right here, the date, the opponent, the location, the results, and any notes that we have. Now, one thing that might be nice about this table is to be able to separate these games by month. This is just an abbreviated schedule. They have a lot more games in November, but I've chosen a game in October, some games in November, and one game in December. So maybe it would be nice if we had October up here, and then November in between these, and December in between these. So to do that, I'm going to go right here above October. I'm going to add in one more table row right here. And by adding this table row in here, I'm going to create a table header because I'm talking about a month here. So for the table header, now I'll put October right here. If I just put one cell in, then I just get that one cell right here. What I want this cell to do is span all the way across all of the columns. So I want this to span multiple columns. In fact, I want it to span 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns. So on this cell, I could go call span, because we're spanning columns, and put the number 5 right there. And by doing that, then it spans all 5 columns. So I'll snap my fingers and do November and December too. And so I put another one of these in between the October and November games. Notice it starts with a table row and ends with a table row. Just has one cell in it because it spans across all 5. The same with this December right here. So we'll refresh. And now we have October, November, and December. Now if I wanted to, I could have December just span 3 columns. And I can add another cell here. And so we'll refresh. And now we see that we have December and Merry Christmas, but that's just in one cell. So December spans 3 and Merry Christmas only spans 1. We can have Merry Christmas span 2 cells. And there we go. That looks a little bit better now that Merry Christmas spans 2 cells. So you can span cells. Now another thing here, these 2 games right here are the Asian Pacific tournament right here. And there's this is just one tournament. We have the notes on both of them. Maybe we could just say Asia Pacific tournament and have this span 2 rows. So we'll go to the very first Asian Pacific tournament. So here's the first game on November 5th. Here's the Asian Pacific tournament, and we'll tell it to row span 2 to span down 2 rows right here, and we'll see what happens if we just leave it like that. Now we see that it spans the two cells, but on this row right here we have this extra column right here because we have the Asian Pacific tournament. So we'll just take out the second Asian Pacific tournament, and when we do that, then we get a table that looks like this, which is what we wanted. And this table is pretty well understood. We can see that the dates right here, the opponents right here, the location, the results, and the notes right here. But sometimes tables could get a little bit confusing, especially for screen readers. For those that can't see well, they'll have readers that will read HTML to them. And the readers might not know how to line up the column header with the column data right there. Now this table is fine, so you wouldn't need to do this, but I'll show you if you have a really confusing table how you can line up different headers with different columns. So what you do is you add an ID onto the headers, so we'll call this one date. And of course we can add an ID for opponent. And remember, IDs do have to be unique, so if you use date or opponent somewhere else, you can't use those names again. And then when we actually have the date right here, then we use the headers attribute, and we use the same name as the date. And then we'd also use headers here, and we'll put opponent in right there. And then we should finish all of these now. So we should have a location, results, and notes right here, and we should also put that here. We should also put these headers on the other games as well. But since this table is pretty easy to understand, we won't do that, and I'll snap my fingers and take those out. So I've taken those out. If you want to read more about making your table accessible for those that have seeing impairments, make sure you search online on how to do that. So now that we have a table here and we're doing row spans and column spans right here, we're ready to style this table up. So instead of doing table border equals 1, we'll go ahead and set the border in the CSS style sheet. So I'm going to give this an ID of schedule instead. And then in my CSS style sheet, I have a LinkedIn right here, bball.css. We'll go ahead and pull that up. And it's blank right now, but we'll go ahead and style up the schedule right here. And we'll add a border first. And we'll have a 5-pixel border, and it will be solid. And we'll go ahead and add in a Seasider color right here. So this is Seasider red. And now once we do that, we'll see that we have this right here. We can also change the width of our table. So I'll use 95% right here. And so that changes the width, and then we can do margin auto. Let's see, auto for the top and bottom, and zero margin on the this is for the top and bottom. First we'll have zero margin, and then auto on the left and right to be able to center this horizontally on the page. So now we have that. Now next we'll add borders around this, so let's go ahead and do that. So to add the borders around the table cells, we'll go ahead and have to select our table cells, and we'll also want this for our table headers as well. So with the comma here, we select both the table data cells and the table header cells, and we'll go ahead and add a border, make it 1 pixel, solid, and we'll use a light blue color for that. Now as you can see, there's spacing in between all of these. So next we'll get rid of that spacing. So back onto the schedule, remember this selects the table tag. So I'm adding these properties right to the table tag right here. And I could do a border spacing right here. And I could try 0 pixels right there. And that collapses these down right there. I can also add more spacing right here. And that increases the space between them right there. So there's the border spacing. And another thing that we could do is do the border collapse. And this will look a lot like border spacing 0, except for the lines will be a little bit thinner. So this allows the cells to share borders when we do border collapse. And so as you can tell, the lines are just a little bit thinner when we have the border collapse property. Now, of course, we can add more spacing inside of here by adding a padding in here. So that'll give the cells more space if we wanted to do that. So that's by adding the padding. So back in our HTML, we can add a caption, right? This has to go before any table row for it to pass all of the validations. So we just add a caption tag and an ending caption tag, and we could just go Seasider schedule right here. And that adds the caption up above our table right there. So if we want a caption on a table, we could just easily add the caption tag right inside the table. And now we can style up this table a little bit more. So I'm going to change the font and some other stuff that will make this table look nicer, and I'll snap my fingers and do that. Alright, so I added a font family on here, and for both the table cells and also the caption, and they're different fonts, and now we can see the result of that. So the table's looking a little bit nicer. Now the next thing I want to do, instead of using borders on these table cells, we can use background colors instead. So I'll snap my fingers and add some background colors on this. Alright, so one thing I did is I took out the border declaration inside of this right here. And then I've added a couple of classes to my table, a table heading and a month heading. So inside of my HTML, inside of the very top row, I added a class called table heading on each TH cell. And then on the months, I've added a month heading on each one of those 3 months. And I also added it to the Merry Christmas tag right there. And then the table heading, I decided to give the background color the Seasider red with a kind of light gray color for the color. And the month heading, I decided to make black with this kind of light gray right here. And so this is the result of the page styled up using background colors. So now off camera, I have added a couple more games. I've also taken away the padding from these cells right here. That way I get a more compact table. And the last thing I did is I stopped row spanning my Asia Pacific tournament. It used to span 2 rows. I just decided to put in another cell on the second row and stop spanning the first one, which gives me a table that looks like this. And once we start getting a lot of games in here, as people try to read our table, they might get confused. They might cross this game up into the Asia Pacific or not be able to follow the lines really well. So to help them read it better, we can have every other row have a different background color. So to do that, what we can do is we can add a class onto every other row. So this one we added odd. We'll skip the months. And now this one we can add a class called even. And then we'll put odd on the next one. And even on the next one. And I would put them on all of my rows that I have, but this will do for now. And then we can style up and we could choose which row we want. So we'll choose the odd row, and we can give it a background color. And the light gray works pretty well with this. And now we could see that we have a background color on this one, and we can also do it on the evens as well. And now we highlight these 2 rows with this background color so that we can follow the lines a lot easier. Now that's the way we used to have to do it. However, there is an easier way that we can do that. And so I'm going to take these classes and I'm going to have the same class. I'll call them each a game because each row is a game. So I'm changing all the classes to game now instead of odd and even. And we'll add this onto the remaining rows as well. And we have it on the last one. So once we've done that, now we can style up the game, and now this will make every row have the light gray color. But now we could get every other one by using a pseudo class. So we've talked about pseudo classes before when we've talked about anchor links. And this is a pseudo class called nth type of, and then we could say odd. So this means it will select every other game right here. So notice I'm using the class game. I have a dot game right here, and this will select every other one and give it the background color that we want. So now we have the first one, then this one, then this one, and then this one. We can also do the evens as well. And that changes the highlighting to these 2 right here. So the nth type of right here is a way that we can select every other element and then give them a property. So there is one more pseudo class that we'll talk about, and to do that I'm going to add a paragraph onto my page. Alright, in my HTML I've added this paragraph right here above the table, just right above the table, still in my main content. And I gave it a class called schedule text, and we have some text. So let's see how that looks on the page. We have this text right here, and now using another pseudo class, we have used the class schedule text we added that class onto the paragraph, and now I can use the pseudo class first letter like that. And now we can make the font size bigger. And we'll also make the color different. And we'll also make the font bold. And so that makes this first letter of the paragraph bold. So that's a way that we could select the first letter. So that's another pseudo class. There are other ones like first child and last child and first of type and last of type. And you can look those up on your own. I usually don't use them very often because it's a lot easier to just add the classes onto the elements that you want to select instead of trying to select the first child of an element or the last child of an element. But you do have those selectors if you want to use them.